You are listening to the Bright Life Podcast, all about ways to stay inspired, chase your dreams, and find more gratitude in the highs and lows of the journey. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. I'm a business owner, a part-time digital nomad, a self-growth junkie, a believer in other big-hearted women, and am all about sharing tips, tricks, lessons learned, and encouragement so we can all live our biggest, brightest lives. You ready? Let's do this. Well, hi, and welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited because I have someone who's become so dear to me, and I just am so excited to share her with you. She has so much wisdom around finding clarity and infusing adventure and desire into your life, and even reconnecting to what that means. So welcome to Carrie Doan. She is a clarity and pleasure coach, an entrepreneur, a life enthusiast, and a believer in all things possible. She runs the Clearly Connected podcast, which is amazing, and developed a course on mastering emotional and social intelligence, training both corporate and school systems to support them toward greater emotional awareness and expression. Carrie is passionate about empowering women while supporting them towards their biggest dreams. And in her spare time, you'll catch her running with her kids or taking an occasional micro adventure into the wilderness. So welcome, Carrie.
Oh, so good to be here, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited for our conversation today. And, we've touched on this a little bit, but you coach a lot around helping people get clear on those desires and gain clarity for what their next step looks like. So do you want to bring us into, with your own words, kind of how you came to this?
Yes. So, um, I would say that my first moment of kind of existential confusion came when I was around 18 or 19, when I was finishing up high school and going into college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And unfortunately, I didn't have somebody to kind of support me in getting that kind of clarity. And it resulted in, just trying out different colleges, and nothing was really sticking. And so, that took place. And eventually I became like a cosmetologist and got myself into that kind of a business. But along the journey, I also kind of took on these tendencies of becoming what I would call like a people pleaser and a perfectionist. And so in all of that, I felt like um I didn't really know what I wanted, right? Like I was always kind of outsourcing my energy to other people and what they wanted, and also I just didn't have that support to get the clarity for myself. So once I kind of started to explore this question of like, what do I really want, which didn't happen until almost reaching the age of 40.
Mm-hmm.
When I started my coaching career, that is when I started to realize, like, wow, I have been missing out this whole time on what I actually want. I've spent so much time trying to prioritize other people and doing what everyone else thinks that I should do. And so once I made that pivot and I got into coaching and supporting other people through that process, I ended up making big life changes. I left a marriage that was holding me back and became more of like an independent single mother doing now entrepreneurial work that I'm so passionate about. So, in a way, I look back and I think, wow, like my greatest struggle and question in life turned into my life's work, which now I see as this energizing contribution that I get to offer other people. But it came from that moment and those moments in time where I was confused, right? And so I just really want that for other people now, to reclaim their desires and give themselves permission to go after what they want in life.
There's so much in there that you said that I think is gold, like the outsourcing the desires to someone else or letting them choose. And then also how powerful that your greatest question became the thing that you then, once you solve it, can go and support other people with. And it becomes this passion that you're so connected to because you experienced the side of not having it and now seeing just the impact that it can make when you finally have found that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
I think this happens to a lot of people where that pain point that they suffered through and overcame becomes the very thing that they can then offer to other people.
Yeah.
It's this really meaningful, rewarding experience to have. So,
Yeah. And where do women have a hard time when it comes to discerning their desires? And maybe like, why do you think that is?
yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think that, because the mind is overemphasized in our Western culture, I think there happens to be oftentimes this disconnect from our bodies.
Yeah.
Um, and this is true for men and women, but I think for women especially. And so we don't really have a sense of what's going on, like from the neck down. So
Yeah.
I think, I really believe that we all have this instinctual sense of knowing in our gut, like knowing who we authentically are, knowing what we want and what's right for us. And I think we can start to notice that when we start to foster that reconnection to our bodies. So, oftentimes, the first step is to kind of create space to get back in tune with your body and pay close attention to where you're feeling led and just kind of play around in that space, right? Like trying things out to see how they actually feel to you. And I've noticed that engaging in this way, it just reignites, I think, a sense of self trust in your ability to make the right decisions for you, right? Like your desires. And it's not just because someone else is telling you to do something. It's like you reclaiming your full autonomy.
Hmm.
So, kind of to your second question of like, why do I think that this is? Well, I think it's for many reasons. I spend a lot of time thinking about the systems that we're raised in, the systems of authority and hierarchy that kind of ask us to outsource our ability to think and feel for ourselves and to kind of follow the crowd of conformity with all these rules to follow. And I think these systems can offer this sense of safety and this sort of feeling of fitting in, but I kind of think it's an illusion because sometimes your authenticity gets compromised in the process. So I would equate like authenticity to true desire. So when you're
Mm.
following your truth, you get this like sense of freedom that you never maybe knew existed. And I think it takes a lot of courage to go against the grain. And sometimes when you do go after your desires, you may be met with a little bit of backlash for being bold enough to say that your desires matter. But personally, I think that the payoff of freedom is so worth it. And this is reminding me of this Brene Brown quote that I always think about, where she says something like, true belonging doesn't require you to be someone other than who you really are. And
Mm.
I think that's it, right? Like the things that we yearn for and long for, these desires are who we are. And so it's really important to find the people and the safe spaces where you can be supported to go after what you want. Or you may end up getting pulled back into these environments that keep you stuck and small.
Absolutely. And you've written something about this and kind of just touched on it, but I think it's such a shift to go from how maybe a lot of us feel, or I certainly did for a long time, which is I almost looked at these desires as like almost the flip side, the negative, right? Like there were these things that I had to contend with or kind of corral in and make sure they lined up with what the school said I should want, what society and everything. And it really shifted for me when I started thinking of them, like you said, where they're they're within you, like they're given to you, and that's almost a good thing. It's not something to fight or force or push down or make sure it fits in the box. It's actually such a gift to be able to look at these things that only you have in this certain way and say and just like acquaint yourself to what are those, what do they feel like, what do they say if there are no limits, and just what a freeing feeling that is, and just that kind of nuanced shift of looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, truly, it is it's a shift, right? Especially if you've not been in the practice of kind of sensing your own needs and wants for all the reasons that I kind of mentioned, it can be almost like a reawakening once you allow yourself to just like go there. But yeah, like you said, the freedom is just, it's amazing to say like, this is what's right for me and I'm going to go after it. And I tell people all the time, like, I think most of the time you would say it's worth it. It's worth the effort. So
And if someone is listening and they're like, that sounds great, I feel like there's a part of me that knows I'm missing that. But where do I even begin? Would you say it really is in that stillness of kind of seeing what comes up? Are there any other ways that people can even just reconnect to what they might want and can't even really feel anymore?
yeah, there are, a few kind of quick tips that I offer people right off the bat that are fairly simple that you can kind of engage in. And the first one is this step of presence, like you just said, getting still. Maybe this isn't a meditation practice or being alone in solitude and starting to notice, like, again, back into your body, into your gut. Like, what are you sensing in there? What are you feeling? What are you noticing? And over time, I think you'll pay attention in a new kind of way and get these impulses that maybe like say, hey, reach out to this person, or maybe you could try this thing. And you just kind of follow and play around with that. But then, in addition to that, I would say, okay, let's say you sense you want to step out in a new direction. Well, also, I think it's important to kind of have this healthy level of detachment from whatever the outcome is. So
Mm,
to say, you know what, I think I want to explore this direction, and yet I don't know or expect where that's going to lead me, and that's okay.
mm-hmm,
And that kind of opens the field to this element of surprise and wonder and awe as you're kind of exploring what you want and who you are. Um, and then on a more interpersonal level, I would say things like learning to communicate your feelings. Let's say you have a partner or a child or just the loved ones in your life. I think if you can let them in on what it is that you want so that they can meet you there to hopefully support you in pursuing that
mm-hmm.
can be significant in terms of like your ability to move forward, especially if they're a supportive voice. And then beyond that, I would say simple things like connecting with nature, going out on a hike maybe and kind of feeling in tune with what's around you. I don't know. I personally feel like I tend to get more clarity and I have a sense of connection when I'm out in those spaces. I
Yeah.
feel like there is abundance here. There's possibility. There's it's a place you can kind of dream a little bit more easily. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that, and then the last thing I would say is to just be focus on you, right? Like get space maybe away from all the other voices that you've been operating under. Maybe it's society's voices or parents' voices or your partners, and just like get time for you to really sit with that question for yourself only, which sometimes it can be difficult. But when you do that, you start to hear those whispers kind of excavate again. So, those are just a few
Mm-hmm.
tips that I think can support this process of, finding out what you really want.
Those are so good. I love how you phrase the detachment to the outcome because it's so spot on. It's like when you're in that phase, it's almost like to give yourself the room to dream again, you kind of have to be willing to just, like, I call it chasing the curiosities, but just kind of following those little rabbit holes. And I just love how you put that because you don't know necessarily where something will go or what it can even turn into. But removing that kind of pressure is exactly what allows you to even reconnect again and to just play almost in like that childhood, way of just, I love doing this. I love doing this with my time. And maybe it turns into a whole career. Maybe it turns into just something that brings you tremendous fulfillment and joy in your life. But it's kind of a win either way. And I think it removes some of that pressure you feel to even try again or begin just by removing that attachment to where it's going to go or what it's going to mean.
Yes. Oh my gosh, for sure. I was just talking to someone today about this. Like, kids are so good, I think, at doing this, especially when they're young. They're just playing, they're exploring, they're curious, and you're enjoying the process, right? It's just
Yeah.
like the becoming is it. Like it's not about where you're arriving necessarily, but are you playing along the way? Are you exploring? Are you trying things out? And yeah, there's going to be hard things, but you'll overcome those, and then you'll grow and learn. And it's just like this is life, right? So I think the more loosely we hold those outcomes, the more we invite this kind of like pleasurable experience into the day to day.
Yeah, it's that sense of adventure that I feel like you're really good at cultivating in your life and chasing, like even how you talk about the micro adventures. I love that term for them. But it's like just inviting that in by seeing where something goes and following a desire is almost an adventure in and of itself that you can look back on, a week from now, a month from now, maybe years from now, and just have this life full of all these rich small adventures that you chased and brought richness to your life in a way.
Yeah, and that's what our lives are made up, right? Of experiences.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people that I come into contact with, they're kind of bored, or they're in this monotony or humdrum, and I just think it doesn't have to be that way. There's, even if it's just simple pleasures, but just ways to kind of like change your perspective and look at what you're faced with in this kind of exploratory way can just open up this whole, I don't know, world of just possibilities and fun and enjoyment that I think sometimes we get closed off to as adults when we get all these responsibilities and demands and expectations that we need to meet. So yeah,
Mhm.
that is a huge piece of what I get passionate about.
Yeah. And if someone is saying, okay, I have an idea of this thing that I really want, and there's this but that's like, I can't because of this or that, or I could never go after this. What are your thoughts on that? How do you almost give yourself or give someone else that permission of it's okay, like you're still safe exploring these, or looking at a desire that maybe you don't fully want to accept or someone in your life doesn't fully want to accept.
Yes, yes, I love this question. And I think it's such a gift to be in touch with your own desire and to know, clearly when you do or don't want something. And so I think so many women especially are conditioned to believe that their desires are bad. Again, like that they should put others first, or maybe that their autonomy is less valuable. So,
Mhm.
you can think again about like people pleasers and perfectionists, and that's all about being acceptable to someone else and what they want. And so then kind of add on to that the ways that I think we've had to struggle to establish our worth and value in society, that you can often feel like confused and disempowered about what you actually want. So, another thing I want to just insert here that I've been thinking about lately is this connection between desire and consent. So, if you
Mm,
think about the word consent, it means saying yes on your own terms, and it means giving permission or agreement for something to happen. And I do think that so many of us have had our boundaries crossed before we even learned anything about saying yes or no. Maybe like when
mhm.
we were young, or when we started coming into the world of desire. So I think the first step toward getting clear on your desire, is self awareness and tuning in, kind of like I mentioned earlier, and being able to find that distinct yes or no inside of your system. And like I said earlier, I'm just a big advocate of creating space to get to the clarity. So for me, when I was going through this process, I had to engage in this period of like separating myself from other people to get really still and clear from other people's attention or their voices in order to hear my own longings. And I think too, if you're an empath, it can be really hard to hear your own voice when you're so easily able to take on other people's emotions. But the second thing I would do is to surround yourself with people who will cheer you on and support your desires.
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's nothing that will cut your longings down faster than a naysayer or a person who doesn't understand who you are or who you wish to become or what you want to go after. So I do think like being in the company of other people who see your value and worth, they will then automatically raise your awareness and standards for what you deserve, and all of that includes your desires, I think. So does that answer your question? It was kind of a long.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It really speaks to, I think, giving yourself the permission around it. And then also whether the voices in your life almost being not so protective of it that you feel like you can't share it, but just making sure that it's like that seedling in the beginning, that it's going to be nurtured and the people that you're sharing it with almost can amplify it. I like once was talking with this like leadership coach, and she said there's so much power in having a circle that you say your dream, and especially among women we are so good at amplifying it for the other person and saying, wow, you want to do this, you should definitely do that, you'd be the best at that, can you imagine how many people you would reach and how big it could become. But it's like, I think in the beginning, when you're first starting to hear those desires again, it's so important to find people in your life, or outside of your even normal circles, that will go and do that and almost help you start to believe in it and see the possibility as well.
100%. I mean, you said it so well. I agree. There's so much power even in just one voice of somebody saying like, "Oh, I believe in you. I see it. I see your potential, the possibility of what you can do." And it changes the way that you see yourself and what you might think you are capable of. It gets you past those limitations. So I don't know how the magic of that happens, but it is so
Mhm.
powerful. So yeah, I would say like at the very beginning, if you're kind of like, I don't know what I want, what direction to go, of any of the things, you change your environment by changing the people in it, can have such a dramatic effect on the direction your life will take.
And you've spoken a little bit about the difference you've seen, but does anything stand out to you for the difference or transformation it can make when you start living from this place where you hear your desires and act on them?
Yeah. Well, to me, I think prioritizing desire is so life-changing. I've seen it in my life and other people's lives. And I just, I want to clarify the word desire just a little more because
Yeah.
I think like what I mean by this word is this kind of yearning for something more, right? Like it's something that our heart is calling us to. And sometimes when people hear this word, they're thinking of like base indulgences, like
Oh,
obsession,
true.
yeah, pleasure seeking in food or shopping or whatever it might be. But to me, that's just like another escape from reality. So when I say like desire and pleasure, they're not about escaping reality, but just diving deeper into it and yourself. And so I think what drives us there is uh, um, yeah, like the direction of wanting to be more authentic.
Mhm.
So the results that I've seen from making this pivot are huge. Like in my personal life, the outcome that I've seen is higher energy. It's this greater capacity to give and be generous, um, and feel this kind of passion as I'm pursuing what I would call as my life's work and purpose.
Mhm.
And so, in conjunction with that, you build this trust in yourself too as you're listening to your desires, and then that can open up space and capacity to take bigger risks. And I've always told people I think the universe rewards boldness.
Yeah.
So that risk taking often will pay dividends in terms of success, fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness. And it doesn't just pay for you, because all the people who you're around, they'll get to benefit from the joy that you receive when you're aligning to yourself and to what you want in life.
Yeah.
So in my clients, I see the same thing. I see depression and anxiety disappear. I see them open up and they start trusting life. They trust themselves and others. I see that increase in energy that then fuels them to take these risks in their businesses and their relationships. And if you don't mind, I had this one recent example I'd love to share.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Of course.
this client of mine, she just has this remarkable journey where 6 months ago, she unexpectedly lost her job. And right after that, then she was asked to leave her apartment by her housemate or roommate. And it was just like this series of unfortunate events that happened to what I considered this really bright, intelligent, capable woman. And things were just like falling away. And she was in this really dark place. And so I was with her through that process, and I kept telling her the whole time to just keep trusting yourself, right? Like just get very clear on and pay attention to what you really want in a job, in your living space, in a relationship. And I kept telling her, I was like, abundance is coming. I can just feel it for you. And she had so many days where she was just holding on by a thread and like
Mm-hmm.
really digging deep into her true desires. But there was so much uncertainty that was just like it was a wild ride. And she literally had no job, and she was being on the verge of becoming homeless and so alone. So fast forward 6 months, lo and behold, like things eventually started to shift for her, as she was thinking, like sitting with this question. She received this opportunity to work at this local craft chocolate shop, very part time. And she
Mm-hmm.
said yes. And then shortly after that, she was asked to contract for this local nonprofit that I put her in touch with doing organizational development. And she said yes to that. And then shortly after that, she was offered a job with the government doing some kind of like advisory policy work
Wow.
that she's about to start full time in the next week, making more money than she ever has before. And she's in this incredible relationship with an incredible man. And she just told
Wow.
me a week ago that she secured her next living space that she's about to move into this weekend. And I look at this and I just think, oh my God, this is so remarkable. But I see this pattern play out over and over when people start to make the shift toward what they want instead of what they think they should do. It's like there's all this serendipity that seems to happen when you start to align to your values and your desires. So I don't know. That story is such an amazing illustration of what's possible.
It really is, and almost how her energy, like maybe her excitement or the possibility of it or the fun of asking that question again, it almost probably led to even part of those opportunities where people could feel the difference or feel the excitement. So they wanted to work with her, wanted to share this opportunity. So I just love how you shared kind of the ripple effect of leaning into this in this one way. It almost just blooms into this thing that you can't even see, only in a matter of 6 months sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think you're spot
amazing.
on with that. Like, yeah, something in our energy maybe shifts or our minds, and then things just start moving in a really cool way. And then all of a sudden you're like living a totally different life that you didn't ever expect was going to turn out this way. So, yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that you touched on that I love too and want to just point out because I'm sure a lot of people are in all different kinds of seasons listening is just the power of like the day to day can still feel sometimes like you're hanging on by a thread or it's not going your direction, but it's just that continued action. Look at what adds up in a few months and how different that can be versus it being like this, how you may feel in the moment kind of day to day. So I love that you called that out as well because I think that's just powerful to remember if you're in one of those seasons. Like a lot can change in a few months or a year compared to what you might feel like in the day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah, time gets kind of distorted sometimes, like when you're in the slog and you don't know what's happening, but then all of a sudden you kind of cross over to the other side and you look back and it's like, wow, so much has shifted in not that long of a period. So,
I
yeah,
know.
there's
That's
power here
amazing.
in doing this. So, yeah.
Carrie, so where can people get in touch with you, follow your work, support you, and continue really like learning about this too?
Yes. So you can find me on my website, which is www.carriedoan.com. I actually just revamped it and launched it yesterday with a new look and brand.
Congrats.
Yeah. So on there, you'll see kind of the emphasis on adventure and pleasure. And in addition to that, on Instagram, you can find me at Carrie Doan Coaching on there. You can also, if you want to check out my podcast, it's called Clearly Connected on Apple, Spotify, and Anchor. And
Mhm.
I would love to share, Jessica, with your guests. I have this little freebie called Dare to Desire that is so on point with what we're talking about today. I'd love to somehow get that passed over to them. But yeah, so those are the main spots where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for everything that you've shared today and just for me personally and anyone who else knows you, I think being an example of this and of reinvention and evolution and being willing to like try and experiment and have those adventures, it's just really inspiring and energizing to see. And I just can't wait to see how you continue to grow it and evolve from here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been such a pleasure to be here.
If this episode resonated with you, I have two things you are going to love. One is a Bright Life workbook full of practices you can use to get clear on what your version of your brightest life looks like and fearlessly move towards it every day. And another is a copywriter starter kit full of beginning steps to create a copywriting business that gives you the freedom to travel the world working from anywhere, to replace a corporate salary as your own boss, and to do creative work that lights you up every day. It's lessons I've learned in creating my own content business, and I'm excited to share it with you if you're curious about doing the same. I will link these in the show notes. I hope these serve you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you back here next week as we all pursue our biggest, brightest lives together.